Fernando Alonso is a man on a mission. He's in his 20th season in F1 and at 42 years old, he is also in a hurry. Since winning his second World Championship in 2006, you could say his career has taken a slightly wrong turn, and this is partly due to matters out of his control. But also, there is no doubt that a large chunk of this is because of self-inflicted things like bad decisions and scandals. And just before we press on, make sure you click subscribe so you can stay up to date with any of my new content. And since that time, he's been through teams like Ferrari and Mclaren, and also Alpine and Renault again. Teams which promised so much and just didn't deliver due to disappointing cars and also bad management. However, Alonso isn't going to get off free here either. When things aren't working out for him, he begins to criticize the team very openly and very publicly, and this then kind of begins the cycle that we usually find him on every few years. And you do wonder if we are starting to see this now at Aston Martin, with the team starting so well and then gradually being outdeveloped and falling behind. Is his patience starting to wear thin? And I think it might be, considering some of the communications we saw between him and the team at Japan and Singapore. But the man is an all-time great, and we will truly miss him once he decides to finally hang up the helmet and leave the sport. And with this in mind, 2024, his final year in his Aston contract, may very well be his final shot at that third World Championship or even a race win. But an enormous amount of factors would have to come together and work well to even entertain this option, especially with Red Bull's dominance and the rise again of Mercedes and McLaren. So we ask ourselves, why does he do this? Why does he put himself through this cycle every few years of promise and failure and repetition? It's as if he knows his own destiny. It's like he's been told by some higher power that if you stick at it, you will achieve this third world title. Maybe we're the stupid ones for doubting him, and he has been shown how it's all going to work out. El Plan, everybody, just follow El Plan. So when Alonso wrapped up those back-to-back championships in 05 and 06 in those stunning blue and yellow Renaults, we all thought that he was going to be the next Schumacher. By the age of 25, he was the youngest race winner, and he was a double world champion. And now with Michael Schumacher retiring, Jesus, how much more is this guy going to win? Well, the answer so far is none. To put this into perspective, imagine Max Verstappen being in the sport for another 15 years and not winning another title. You can trace Alonso's frustrations all the way back to the 2007 season when he started at McLaren. He was reigning world champion, he moved to McLaren, who were just certain to give him a race-winning car, and it looked like that the World Championship was signed and sealed and just had to be delivered. But he had to deal with this unexpected fight from this young rookie named Lewis Hamilton, and he was not used to this pressure from teammates, considering the likes he had to put up with before, such as Fisichella and Trulli at Renault, where he had the number one status. He handled it badly, he got caught up in the Spygate scandal, alienated himself from McLaren, and he left the team empty-handed and with his reputation in tatters. His further 2 years back at Renault delivered 2 wins, but this was just shrouded in the whole Crashgate scandal again. He then moved to Ferrari with the promise of multiple world titles and many, many race wins. This was it. This was going to be the move that was going to cement him into the greats. Or not. But with this move, Alonso won the support of the F1 fans back with his ability to haul an absolute shed of a car into a championship contending position. And this was even more impressive considering he had the likes of the dominant Vettel and Red Bull combination to deal with. And in standard Alonso fashion at the time, he moved to the unknown combination of McLaren and Honda. I like to call this his wilderness years because the only things memorable from his time here at McLaren Honda was that image of him sitting in the camping chair, bathing in the sun, and him yelling GP2 engine over the radio. And then we enter the midlife crisis / need to find yourself years, where he did IndyCar, Dakar, Le Mans, sports cars, and he was probably just doing all these things to kind of get it out of his system a little bit. And then he announced he was going to rejoin Renault for 2021. This is fantastic. He's coming home. All is good with the world. Renault then became Alpine, and he did score his first podium since 2014. But it was a very forgettable time. And due to Alpine dithering over contracts and not committing, He then took up the opportunity to join Aston Martin, and here we find ourselves in the present day. Now, I'd say it's fair to criticise Alonso for doing things like calling out the team or the engine over the team radio, and think this is not a very tactical or commercially very positive move for him. And no doubt there were times where he was wrong to do this. But where I do have some sympathy is we don't know what's going on within the team, and I can just kind of imagine Alonso just hitting his head against a brick wall repeatedly due to the incompetence of, say, McLaren Honda, who are just sticking to their shocking decisions and just terrible management. Now, if any other driver tried to adopt this mentality, they would be booted out immediately. But the fact that Alonso is still in the sport after 20-something years shows that he has something really unique to offer, and still to this day. And in 2023, I'd like to think he has cooled off a bit and learned a bit from his errors and is approaching things in a more team-friendly and constructive manner. Alonso's been in a constant pursuit for his third world title since 2006, and prior to Aston Martin, he was quickly finding himself in a position where he was running out of teams that were going to give him this opportunity. Top teams like Red Bull or Mercedes just weren't going to give him this opportunity for the fear of him bringing a negative or toxic atmosphere into the team. But despite this, he is convinced he is going to win again, and it's this positivity or even perhaps naivety that kind of keeps him going. The Aston Martin move was very unexpected, considering that they have been a shambles for their existence so far in Formula One, and not really seen as a very serious outfit, considering that they've got Lance Stroll on board. And also, don't forget, this is the team that drove Sebastian Vettel to despair and ultimately retirement. It was going to take a hell of a sales pitch, but in walks Flavio Briatore. Now, it's worth mentioning that Flavio Briatore, yeah, good old Flav, is Fernando Alonso's manager. The man who guided him to 2 world titles at Renault all those years ago is still part of Fernando's world. It's debatable whether this is a good or a bad thing, considering the decisions in the past, but it's very interesting that these two have stuck together for all these years. Flavio was instrumental in doing the deal with Lawrence Stroll and Aston Martin to bring Alonso to the team in the first place. And apparently Alonso was very reluctant to do this. He didn't see this as a positive move. But there, as I said, Flavio did his thing. He managed to convince Alonso, and a deal was done. Alonso was going to be an Aston Martin driver. And things looked really positive. A few races into the 2023 season, Alonso was adamant that a third world title is still possible and still in his sights. But for Aston's side, it was clearly a big risk on their part, considering Alonso's character and also his reputation. But I can imagine that with Vettel departing, Aston Martin needed a world championship to fill his shoes and also please the shareholders and backers and sponsors. Now, Alonso is clearly an awesome driver and has a great F1 mind, but unless you are 100% competent and reflect the dedication that he is putting in, that relationship between driver and team is going to deteriorate quite quickly. Now, on one hand, you can admire this because this shows that he will only accept excellence, and anything less than this is a failure. But on the other, this shows that this mentality is very dangerous, because this might indicate that he is not flexible, he can't build a team, and he can only perform in a car that is 100% ready to rock and roll and ready to win races. I'm not knocking him, I think he's great, but this is just kind of what the stats and history suggests. And so, shuffling on a bit, we find now Alonso a fully fledged Aston Martin driver, partnering the Stroll offspring at the team. By the way, I tried to take a sympathetic approach to Lance Stroll in a previous video I did, but after his behaviour at the Qatar race weekend, he can absolutely do one. Okay, rant over. He signed a 2-year contract. Aston Martin were in the process of moving out of their original Jordan factory and into their brand new state-of-the-art new factory, and there was potential there, far more potential than there would have been at Alpine. I think Alonso's understanding was that he arrived at Aston Martin with a car that was able to straight away win races and put up a title fight, and he was nearly right. He racked up 6 podiums in the first half of the season and then another at Zandvoort. His best season in years, and he absolutely would have won races if it wasn't for those pesky Red Bulls. There was some great positivity at the start of the season. Alonso was back and he was going to be our saviour and lead the fight against Max and Red Bull. And we were now seeing a more cool and calm and collected Alonso who was willing to go and play the team game. The issue was that whilst providing a car that was easily second best on the grid at the start of the season, Aston Martin didn't have the capacity to develop the car as thoroughly as the other teams, and Alonso got displaced off the podium gradually by the Mercedes and Ferraris and McLarens, and they just gradually fell behind, especially in the Constructors' Championship. So right now the AMR 23 has hit its developmental ceiling and cannot compete directly with the front-running cars, and I'd say there is a possibility that Alonso isn't best pleased with this. In fact, he might even be going to Lawrence Stroll saying, hang on, this isn't what you promised me at the start of the year. So I think that cracks might be starting to show between the Alonso and Aston relationship, particularly after the performances we saw at Singapore and Japan, where Alonso in fact scored his first pointless race of the season. And in standard Alonso fashion, some very interesting things were said over the team radio. What makes me concerned is that once this has started, the situation has never really improved. But also, there is every possibility that Alonso has improved his ways since he realizes that 2024 could be his final roll of the dice. But at the start of the season, this was great to see. We were seeing a new, re-energized Alonso. And I bought this personally, hook, line and sinker. In fact, I even bought a Fernando Alonso t-shirt. Anyway, moving things on, we finally look ahead to 2024. Whilst we expect more of the same, Red Bull absolutely running wild with a small sprinkling of Mercedes and McLaren victories here and there has to be a glimmer of hope somewhere for Aston Martin. Now here's why. Aston Martin would have moved fully into their state-of-the-art new factory by then, and you would think surely that has got to offer them something that they currently don't have right now. But also, if Aston just wrote off the Constructors' Championship, it's not going to happen, especially with Stroll on board, and just focused on the Drivers' title, potentially that might work for them. No, really. By throwing every bit of strength and every resource they have behind Alonso and treating Stroll as an afterthought, they could possibly pull this off. Not so much emphasis on Drivers' Championship, but you know, a race win here and there. So build everything, and I mean everything on the car, to Alonso's liking. If he wants the radio button 0.5 millimeter higher, bloody well do it then. If he wants the front end to be more active or whatever, get it done, sort it out. Whilst all the other teams are having to field 2 cars and cater for them equally, Aston Martin will just be fielding Fernando Alonso in his car with all the brand new parts and new everything catered singly towards him, and then also having Lance Stroll as his teammate, and he'll just be running as just an afterthought. Now obviously that wouldn't be allowed because it probably breaches some sort of technical regulations and some sort of commercial agreements Aston have, but if Aston could get as close to that as they possibly can, I think they could still be competitive next year. But I'm telling you, the Lawrence Stroll Aston Martin project need to deliver in 2024, because I'm sure their backers and sponsors who were promised so much are now beginning to look at this team that started positively and fell behind. They're going to start to say, well, what happened? We put up all this money and you promised us this. What the hell is going on? And now there have been rumours of Lawrence Stroll looking to sell the team for a cool 800 million. You know, again, these are just rumours, but I would not be surprised if this happened. And it would also be a very Alonso thing to happen to Alonso. But this is it. 2024 is most likely Alonso's final roll of the dice in F1. I think everyone kind of wants him to get that 3rd world title, but I think we'd all just be happy for him to get a race win now at this stage, to be honest. But as I said at the start of this video, perhaps he knows something we don't. Perhaps he knows his own destiny. Perhaps he knows that he's going to win races and get another title, or it will just end in a complete and utter failure. But either way, it will be a brilliant end to the Alonso story one way or another. That destiny could be race wins or even the 2024 title, or just a complete and utter failure and more controversy. We don't know. Given the histories of Alonso and Aston Martin, whatever happens will be at either end of the spectrum. It will either be fantastic or terrible. I don't think there'll be a middle ground. Either way, we'll be talking about Alonso in 2024, I guarantee. Now, finally, from a fan perspective, I still have great admiration for Alonso because he is a driver's driver. And also, he is the last of the V10 era drivers, a time that was considered the greatest in Formula One. It's a tall order for Aston Martin to deliver a race-winning car, let alone a World Championship winning car for next season. But if there's any driver on the grid that can haul an absolute wheelbarrow of a car into a competitive position, it is Fernando Alonso. As long as he keeps his cool, doesn't throw his toys out of the pram, and does the talking on the track, Alonso might just surprise us for 2024. Thank you so much for watching. Please give me a like if you enjoyed this video. I'm Paul, and as always, thanks very much, and see you soon.